On November 2nd, 2023, ICAHD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, issued this call for an end to Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people. And I want to read it. It's not a long call. The term genocide was formulated by the Jewish-Polish lawyer Raphael Lemkin against the backdrop of the Holocaust. It was codified as a crime under international law in the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, otherwise known as the Genocide Convention. The definition of genocide, as set out in Article 2 of the Convention, is simple and straightforward. Its first three elements clearly reflecting Israeli policies and actions towards the Palestinian people since initiating its process of systematic genocide in 1947. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. First of all, killing members of the group. Second, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. And third, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. That's from the Genocide Convention. By itself, the ongoing destruction of Gaza and its people is a war crime. It's far too disproportionate to qualify as mere retaliation for the Hamas attack on Israeli civilians, far too costly in civilian life and property to justify the scale of Israel's military action against Hamas. Genocide is often not a single event, but a series of deliberate events and processes over time whose ultimate intent is to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The Indian Wars in America, for example, lasted 3 centuries. If we step back from the war crime that is Israel's current assault on Gaza to the concerted effort since Israel's establishment to erase the country of Palestine and its Arab heritage, the picture that emerges is one of genocide, cultural as well as physical. Zionism's and later Israel's necessarily violent project to displace the country's Palestinian population, take its land, and replace it with a Jewish one constitutes a deliberate destruction of the Palestinian people in part or in whole. 3 events have prompted ICAHD's call for urgent international action to end Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people. The indiscriminate bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza on October 31st, in which hundreds of innocent people, refugees, we have to remind ourselves, from Israel's campaign of expulsion in 1948, were slaughtered in order to assassinate a single Hamas commander. The second event was the brutal attacks happening now against Palestinians in the West Bank, in which Israeli settlers and soldiers are terrorizing families and emptying whole towns and villages. Forced displacement, a crime under the 14th Geneva Convention. And the third event that prompted our statement was the statements of genocidal intent emanating from the highest Israeli government and military officials, whether towards the people of Gaza or directed at Palestinians in general. Statements that lead us to fear heightened colonization and further genocide if the international community allows Israel free rein to erase the Palestinian people politically, culturally, and if need be, physically. The Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, ICAHD, calls on the international community, the UN, governments, and peoples to hold Israel accountable for its decades of genocidal colonization. More urgently, we call for isolating and sanctioning Israel until its destruction of Gaza and its people ends, and the violent displacement of Palestinians from their lands and communities by Israeli settlers and soldiers cease. We call on the International Criminal Court to bring to trial for war crimes the responsible Israeli political and military leaders. We call on the United Nations to enforce Article 3E of the Geneva Convention, punishing for complicity in genocide the United States, Canada, Europe, and other countries contributing to Israeli genocide. End Israeli genocide now. We call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and we call for freeing all Israeli hostages and Palestinian political prisoners. That's the ICAHD call for an end to Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people.